And therefore he called his daddy to tell him what he did. As the master screams the lyrics of a messed up kid. And then he told that old man he was never coming back to be cut down again in a town like that. Then he surely came to learn people come to watch you fall. He's out to make a name and a fool out of them all. They'll never understand that boy and his kind. All they comprehend is a fucking dollar sign. Don't stop going south, 'cause they'll let you play your music real damn loud. Don't stop heading south. They won't understand the words that are pouring from your mouth. Don't stop going south. They won't understand the words that are pouring from your mouth. Don't stop going south. 'Cause they'll let you scream your music real damn loud.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Fiat-free Twitter space, co-hosted by Trezor. And tonight we have a very special guest, Brian Harrington, who walks the walk and lives a fiat-free life. So before we get into it, some organizational matters. This space is recorded and will be published later on the Trezor YouTube channel. And we'll initially have a one-on-one discussion with Brian, but feel free to raise your hand throughout the discussion and we will give you an opportunity to join in and ask your questions. If you don't want your voice recorded, just comment on the Trezor Twitter Spaces tweet or send us a DM and we will raise your question for you. So let's get into it. Hello, Brian. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you. Coming in clear.
Cool. So to get things started, if you could perhaps tell us a little bit about your background and what you're currently up to, and also why did you pick the song we just played?
Totally. No, hey, I'm really fired up to talk today, so appreciate it. And yeah, I'm jealous that you got live music into the spaces because that's something I'd been trying to hack around and figure out how to do for a long time. And so, no, I already love the vibe, and I'm fired up for today. The song I picked is "Headed South" by Zach Bryan. And I love country music. So I love country music, but then just this line right here, and it talks about just like getting after life, but like this line right here, they will never understand that boy and his kind. All they comprehend is a fucking dollar sign. Like I think about that a lot because they're like, and for the topic of today, just about you, like, what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing here? And what is Bitcoin doing? And just how does it fit like in the world? Like I love personal finance. And I just love thinking about like how to like live optimally and like manage my finances like optimally. But then I'm also like very fired up about all of the like practical like freedom fighting elements like of Bitcoin. Like both I think are just so like I love holding both of them with an open hand, and it's really hard for me to like stay on one or the other. And so that's what this song like it just talks about. Like some people are never going to understand, like they don't understand why we have to fix the money, why we have to fix the world, but we're going to do it anyways.
Oh yeah, I love that. And in terms of your background, like what did you do before you discovered Bitcoin, and what do you do now?
Yeah. So I studied business admin in college, just got a normal business admin degree, worked at a grocery store in high school, like born and raised in Colorado, and then lived in Washington State. Now I live in California. Regular childhood before that. I wanted to be a hedge fund manager. Like I liked business, like I was in Future Business Leaders of America. Like I wanted to be, like I aspired to be like a finance person. After college, I went to work for a credit union, and I was selling loans for a credit union, and there were people that were, 10 years older than me, only making like $2 more an hour than me, like at this credit union. And so at the same time, I got offered to kind of just go off and do my own thing and get I started getting paid to work on political campaigns, which sounds like a weird random pivot, but like I love networking. Like I love networking. So I would just meet people. And so I got this job working on a political campaign. And once you're in that world, those people kind of keep calling you back. So every 6 months, I would get called for a new thing, like a new person running for city council, or a new person running for Congress, or a new person, trying to get like a ballot initiative passed to like build some building. And so it was during that time that I was like, it was very gig work. Like political campaigns are very gig work. And so I would have like a month, 2 months off at a time. And like my like girlfriend, now wife, would like be at work, and I would be at home, like watching Bitcoin YouTube. And so as my satisfaction with politics, like got worse and my satisfaction with Bitcoin got better, like eventually that kind of crossed. And when I met Bitcoiners in person for the first time, which is in Bitcoin Pizza Day, May 2019, was the first time I'd ever met Bitcoiners in person. And there were 7 of us at a bar in Orange County, California, talking about Bitcoin. I just kind of like immediately made the connection that, because up till then, Bitcoin had been a finance thing for me. Like it been investing, like, which is cool and great. And I understood the freedom aspect of it. But as soon as I met people in person, that just super accelerated it. And so almost basically every day since May of 2019, I've been working like for Bitcoin, basically. Like that's probably when it switched in my brain, that I used to work for the old system and now I work for the new system. And so I'm activist and volunteer in Southern California, where try to host Bitcoin meetups and try to just grow the amount of people, using Bitcoin and businesses accepting Bitcoin, and kind of get that into the ethos of Southern California, something I work on. And then for my job, I'm the Bitcoin lead at Choice App. Choice App is the highest rated retirement account mobile app for Bitcoiners. And so if you have money sitting in Schwab, sitting in Fidelity, sitting in TD Ameritrade, in these kind of company ran long-term savings accounts, there is now a solution to like move those into Bitcoin. And so that's what we do over there. And yeah, every day, like I'm honestly just blessed to like hang out with everyone here and like continue pushing on this.
All right, cool. And I've seen you advocating for like Bitcoin circular economy quite a lot, and quite a long time ago, like maybe 2 years ago already. And recently you got onto this Get on Zero idea, and you talk about limiting your fiat footprint. So maybe if you could elaborate on this topic, like what's the motivation here? Why shouldn't I use basically any fiat?
Yeah. So I appreciate that you brought up the 2 years ago, because this definitely has been a journey like for me. And so what happened was, like I said, the meetups in Southern California that I've been a part of started in 2019. And about a year and a half after we'd been going, like this E-man walked into our Bitcoin meetup and said that his uncle wanted to start taking Bitcoin at his taco stand. And this was in like 2020, like during the lockdowns and stuff. And I realized I intellectually knew what BTC Pay Server was, but I had never launched one myself. And so I kind of used a lot of the downtime that I had during that time to like teach myself BTC Pay Server and learn how it worked. And so I was like, it felt really good to be able to have a reason to learn it. And so I went and like helped, and my friend George Mikhail helped as well. And we both drove out to this taco stand and got BTC Pay Server running at this taco stand. And that's when, like, really during the lockdowns and really the experience of onboarding that taco stand made me realize that like Bitcoin is not happening in the future. Bitcoin is happening right now. It's happening right now, live today. And the fact that we were able to help this like random one-off taco stand, small place, start taking Bitcoin just felt very good. And it felt like I was doing something. It felt like we were doing something about the lockdowns and about all the frustrating things that were happening in the world by helping, this company begin to move off of like the underlying currency that's causing like the problems in the world. And so that felt good. But what was super interesting is that immediately, so when we bring the good news to Twitter, immediately we're hit with like the classic, like, why would you spend your Bitcoin, like kind of stuff. And so what I want to say for the audience is like all of my experience and everything I'm saying is like admittedly like very US focused. And like when we get later to the Get on Zero stuff and getting paid in Bitcoin, it's very admittedly like W-2 income earner, like people with good credit, like married people with mortgages and family. Like admittedly, that's very who I'm talking to, because I feel like that crowd has like been left out of the live on Bitcoin and live on crypto discussion. And I feel like that crowd is also who is kind of unfortunately like throwing the like why should you spend Bitcoin like in my face and in the face of people that had been working on circular economy 2 years ago and before me. Like, and to be super honest, like nothing I'm saying is new. Nothing I'm saying is new. This is just my experience when in 2020 a taco stand came and talked to me and what happened to me. Like, so then fast forward past that, when I started seeing people tweet about like get on zero so the middle ground right after the taco stand app that super helped on that was Strike app. To be super clear and honest, like Strike app, in my opinion, is what finally kind of broke the back of the like why spend Bitcoin argument, because it allowed quote unquote normie Bitcoiner US person to like feel comfortable like spending Bitcoin at this taco stand in the same way that they would have spent a debit card anyway. So that was just enough ammo to like throw back in the face of the why spend Bitcoin argument that kind of basically bought us a year of time, I think. And largely that is now like common understanding that like there's apps that allow you to spend Bitcoin like at the, regardless of what currency you hold. So that was cool. And fast forwarding to that, I really see Get on Zero as kind of like the next wave of that. Like as soon as people put out threads that said like your holding it was, so the tools got better, but also like the actual like inflation numbers got bad enough to where you could actually run the numbers and realize that holding dollars, you're losing. Holding dollars, you are losing. And so the common thing of like dollars are your checking account, Bitcoin is your savings account, don't spend Bitcoin, like spend dollars. That argument continues to fall apart because the tools are getting better to spend Bitcoin, but then also the holding cost of dollars is getting more painful. And so where it used to be, and here's an example of this. So if you're saving for retirement, right? And not even necessarily in a retirement account, but just any sort of account, you're saving for retirement, obviously Bitcoin. Like fiat is terrible at doing that. If you're saving for this weekend, going to the bar, most likely you'd be okay with dollars. But in the middle, currently, if you're saving up for the down payment of a house, that's a big oof that a regular W-2 person in the United States that doesn't have a house yet is that's climbing over in their brain all the time. Do I save for my down payment? This like medium, what I'm trying to illustrate is a short-term payment, a long-term payment, and a medium-term payment. This medium-term house down payment, people are struggling on if they should hold it in Bitcoin or hold it in fiat. So what the Get on Zero people have been doing is they've been saying everyone needs a front load learning how to live on Bitcoin. And the math is there for that. Bitcoin goes up on average per day, and dollars lose to goods on services on average per day. So because of all of that, like anyone can join the like quote unquote live on Bitcoin, movement.
Yeah. Maybe just to make clear one term you're using for our non-US listeners, what's the W-2?
Yeah, so W-2 is just like a salary. Like you have a salary, you're paid every other week from a company. All
right. Yeah, because in Europe,
your taxes are withheld. Your taxes are withheld from your paycheck. Like it's just the most kind of like safe standard income, as opposed to being like a freelancer or owning your own company or something like that.
All right. So what's your advice for people that basically just live on their paycheck and have like a normie fiat job? Is it to basically just convert everything into Bitcoin as soon as you get the money in your bank account?
Yeah, it would be to hyper analyze like what is the purpose of the dollars in your bank account? Like, so how I just explained that out of like if you're saving for the super long term, I don't believe those are your dollars like in your US savings account. And okay, the dollars in your US bank account at Bank of America, at Wells Fargo, at Chase, like ask yourself, what are they doing? What is the purpose of them? And if the purpose of them is if you have dollars, you have $4,000 sitting in your checking account, and the purpose of those $4,000 is to pay your mortgage like on the first of the next month, like those $4,000 are dead between then and the first of the like following month. Like, so what I would encourage that person to do is that person should have either like, it should be dollars are not doing anything sitting in a bank account. Like, they should be immediately passed to a counterparty, or they should be stored in Bitcoin. And so then, and let's just tackle the volatility. Tackling the volatility, like if you're paid on a 2-week schedule and your bills go out on a 2-week schedule, the band, like yesterday, there was a giant event, right? Like, unfortunately, you know, the exchange rate dropped and reset lower. I think what's happening, and this is what has happened to me after 4 months of like trying this, it's tough. Like, this is arguably like this is a tough thing to wrap your brain around, and I don't plan on like convincing everyone today or like explaining that like I have this like 100% dialed in or whatever. But what I've experienced over the last 4 months is that the fluctuation inside a 2-week band from being paid to your bills that get paid inside that 2 weeks before you like get refilled again on the next paycheck is manageable. That's actually super manageable, because like yesterday, so say you have 20% down in one day, sweet. Like, you're still, then it just like sits there again. Okay. Then the next 2-week cycle is reset at that exchange rate. And so, like I said, this is like what I want people to walk away from this understanding is that normie fiat W2 earner like has the ability to not hold dollars in a bank account. It's like playing perfect strategy in blackjack. Like, the odds are as well in your favor as you can do when you're playing perfect strategy. Like, there is a mathematically correct answer. And we're getting very, very close to the part of where holding dollars for any length of time is like mathematically and like statistically not your best move.
Oh yeah, I get it, and it's mostly aimed at wage earners, basically productive people, not speculators, not like rentiers and stuff like that. Yeah. So you also talk about using fiat as a credit. So how does that work in practice? Like, do you like advise getting a credit card throughout the month and just repay the balance with the paycheck, or how do you manage that?
Yeah. So like, look, we're living during transitionary times. And so I appreciate transitionary tools, and I appreciate transitionary, bridges and tools. So the one that I use the most, like, is spending dollars on credit. So like yes, it's a very real fact in this world that if you're paid in Bitcoin, some counterparties are going to like require dollars. Like, your mortgage company still requires dollars. Your cell phone bill still requires dollars. Your water bill still requires dollars. And so what I would do in those situations is I'd put as many of them on a credit line as possible. And then so I'd put those on a credit line. So it's exactly right. If you live in a place where there's one restaurant that takes Bitcoin and you go there on your Bitcoin meetup day, sweet. Then you're spending Bitcoin at that restaurant, like on Bitcoin meetup day. For all the other nights of the week that you're eating dinner, you're spending on your credit card. And then when your labor comes in, you're paying down the credit line. And so in that way, you're not paying the holding cost of holding dollars. You're basically having the dollars sit on credit, not as an asset, and then you're paying it off with your labor. And like you said, yeah, you're living below your means, and you have like a surplus every pay period and every bills period that goes into it. One more thing, I wanted to talk about like an emergency fund too. So same thing on credit. Like, I have an open HELOC, like, that's completely paid off, and that just sits there open. And so as far as like, what happens of an edge case of price drop inside a 2-week period, and you don't like, my answer would be you should have enough Bitcoin savings in order to sustain a 2-week pay drop in order to like still pay your bills, because that's the whole point. Like, that's the whole point of having a gigantic like Bitcoin savings account, is again, you can play this like perfect strategy correctly. But then also, you could have an open and paid off dollars credit line. And then the majority of like emergencies, also like unplanned emergencies, also have payment plans. Like, the whole world like operates on like cash flow. And so like being able to like manage your cash flow and manage your ins and outs, I think is one of the like best things you can like continue to learn to play optimally.
All right, I see. Let's perhaps get back to the motivation of getting on zero. So from your perspective, do you advocate for that mostly from like financial reasons, like the risk of dollars or fiat getting devalued and Bitcoin just shooting up, or is there a philosophical side to this argument from your point of view?
For sure. No, I love that question. And what's so beautiful is like, yeah, the answer is like a resounding both. Like, that's what I love so much about it, because so Bitcoin Twitter is very, very good at like hitting the philosophical side. Like fiat money bad, orange coin good. Like, every single day, like hammers and hammers and hammers it, right? And so podcast hammer. What is so beautiful about Get on Zero, and if this is like hitting with you at all, like there's a little like Twitter group that will coach you through like how to do this and really get in the weeds of how to start doing it. But what's so beautiful is that it feels like putting the philosophy into action. Like, if fiat money is not good. Like, fiat money is causing wealth inequality and causing war and like physically stealing from people. Like, time theft is happening. The rich get richer. Like, crony capitalism is like running the earth, and super like frustrating. That's all very, very true. Okay. So then if the tools are available for us to stop giving liquidity to the like US dollar system, then we should use them. And we should do it. And what's beautiful is that like nothing will work if it requires altruistic motives. Totally understand that. Bitcoiners really understand that. Talk about game theory, talk about how selfish motivations, and talk about how everyone is out for themselves. Completely agree with that. So what's beautiful is that the math of Get on Zero like is starting to play out to where using Bitcoin as your base money, you will end the year with more Bitcoin than if you were using dollars as your checking account and Bitcoin as your savings account. So yes, it's from a finance perspective. And the other underlying motivation is like I grew up on Dave Ramsey. Like I'm not kidding when like the personal finance like thing, like I had 3 envelopes. Like my parents had me put little change into little different jars, and like I used to listen to my dad, call and renegotiate the cell phone bill. Like I've done like the stuff, like the normal stuff has all been there. And it super bothers me that the like FIRE movement and like traditional personal finance advice is very behind on Bitcoin. That super bothers me. So it's philosophically motivated that like we need to like lower the fiat footprint in the world. Yes, it's selfishly motivated because the math physically makes sense now. And yes, it's like a little bit, I'll be super honest, like it's a little bit like egotistically motivating because I believe like the people that are giving personal finance advice like in this country like are very, very wrong. So we have to write our own personal finance advice like right now. Like we are writing it live, and we need more business owners talking about how they operate on Bitcoin, and we need more individuals talking about how they operate on Bitcoin. Like OG Bitcoiners were very good at talking about Bitcoin. They were very not good at talking about personal finance. Like like it wouldn't have taken me until and want to know why I know that? Because there's podcast recordings of me parroting the, well, you don't want to spend your hard money, you want to spend your soft, like just parroting the Bitcoin Sunday School answers. Like I'm on tape doing that. So that yeah, it's frustrating to me that people that went ahead of us and had like realized that Bitcoin is their base money and they can buy dollars when and if they need it, didn't have more of a platform and didn't have more of like a I don't know, like motivation to like get that out there and fight harder for that at like call it the like social consensus level of Bitcoin. And so what's awesome now is I think we're resetting this. Like we're resetting this right now today. And I'm not doing any of that to like, I'm not like mad about that. I'm just recognizing that is what it is. But we're now here in 2022. The tools are here for regular people to be paid in Bitcoin and for regular people to pay their bills in Bitcoin, or to like farm their labor directly over to the credit line and then store the excess in Bitcoin and still pay off a credit line from Bitcoin if they needed to. Like it's all there from a tools perspective, and it's all there from a like math perspective.
All right. So let's discuss the Bitcoin circular economy. And what strikes me as kind of peculiar is these tend to be very local, whereas like in the early years, you had like Silk Road, WikiLeaks accepting Bitcoin, guys selling socks all over the world for Bitcoin. And now we can see Bitcoiners basically going to their local farmer, restaurant, barber, and orange pilling them personally. So, like, do you think like Bitcoiners tend to focus more on their local surroundings over time? And why is that actually? It just seems like kind of weird that we have this global digital money, but we tend to use them locally first.
Totally. So lots of ways to tackle this one. From my own experience, onboarding brick and mortars to accepting Bitcoin was easier in my experience than like helping a website. And I don't know if that's just because like I'm not a great web designer or whatever, but in my experience, like all of the web platforms like kind of like lock down their checkout flows like pretty hard. And so even with Shopify, like, so it's super cool that now there's Bitcoin integrations, but Shopify still buries the Bitcoin integrations like way on the like third checkout screen. So like there's no way to get rid of the hard coded in fast fiat checkout. Whereas like, yeah. So that's kind of like an answer from just why it was harder for me to like get websites doing it. And then from why it matters locally, I think what's awesome about Bitcoin is that it has like a hyper allegiance to the individual, but then also has a hyper allegiance to like the biggest community on earth, which is just humans. Like, and so that's why I say Bitcoin is the biggest tent movement in the entire world. Like, and Bitcoin is like a Swiss Army knife that's like super effective and can be added onto any sort of localism movement. So like people bring up like the farmers markets and things like that. Like it's true that like if you're going out of your way, and this is what I would say to a farmers market person, I'm like, if you're going out of your way to like shop local and like try to work your life around corporations and like really, know your food like throughout the like chain and be local to it, like, then why are you using a money that's like corporately bastardized at like the highest level? Like that's not as like, so you're like, it's not as fluid and clean as like it could be if you were running Bitcoin. And so everything you're talking about is exactly correct, and you can 10x what you're doing like with Bitcoin. So I think that's a reason why it is like taken off at a local level. And I think just the whole like meetup thing, like I think I don't super love the like, so some people that talk about circular economy hyper focus on like black market usage and hyper focus on like censored transaction usage. And I think that's valuable. I think that's valuable, but I don't think it's as what I'll say on that is I think that's valuable, and that all is what it is. What I prefer to talk about and what I think is also interesting, so like it's additive. I'm not trying to say anything negative. I'm trying to add additive language. So in the same way I'm trying to add language for W-2 and quote unquote normie fiat workers, I'm trying to do the same thing from the business side and from the circular economy side, that them accepting Bitcoin is just good for them, like good for the movement. And this is what I was going to say. A regular business, like a regular coffee shop in a town, defecting from the US dollar is actually like a bigger threat. Like that's a giant threat to the establishment. So like I guess what I'm saying is I just disagree that like the only types of circular economy transactions that are like good for the movement are those that like can be censored, and like you should use like cash in other circumstances. Like I disagree. Like I think Bitcoin is like a bucket and fiat is a bucket, and we need as much labor as possible and human like productivity flowing into the Bitcoin bucket.
All right. I'm not sure if I agree that like Bitcoin adoption on this local, like brick and mortar, local farmers market level is a threat to like US dollar. Why would you think so? Like I would say like the biggest threat would be just some Russia or China dumping treasuries and something happening like on this more like upper levels, not like down there where it's just a couple hundreds of dollars here and there.
Totally. So yeah, I agree with that. Like it's just like straight up measuring size of something, definitely. But I guess what I think about is I think about the scene in Star Wars a lot, and I use it in a lot of analogies and podcasts where the Jedi is negotiating for the pod racer, and the small business owner says like, "Sorry, like Republic credits aren't good out here. Like Republic credits are not good out here." And so I just think about like if a regular person, or to be super honest, like I think about like Atlas Shrugged too. Like if the business owner just says, "Hey, sorry, like that doesn't work anymore. Like go ahead and go over there to the ATM and pull out Bitcoin because we don't take that anymore." Like that is such like a mental switch. Like people share like, but you can't kill an idea whose time has come. Like if a brain, like every single brain that switches over to like, "Hey, sorry, like that doesn't work for me anymore." Like that working for those dollars, like me trading my time and energy sitting here at this coffee shop for like that you just offered to pay me in is like, that doesn't work for me anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's rewriting the social contract. Like entrepreneurs saying that, business owners saying that is rewriting the social contract. So I agree that larger economic things they all are what they are, but I don't want to wait on those. Like, whereas, yeah. So, and I don't think that's what you're saying either, but, yep.
Yeah, I get it. So in your experience, what message about Bitcoin resonates the most with merchants? And I mean them really accepting Bitcoin where they really receive Bitcoin at the end of the transaction, not just use some kind of BitPay.
Yep. I think the message that resonates the most with small businesses for why do you want to take Bitcoin is I think it's some semblance of still a little bit of like an anti-establishment movement, like an anti-banking, anti-establishment, like accept better money, like your money should work better for you, is still what has, like, I've seen work the best.
All right. Yeah. And how about maybe using fiat cash for privacy purposes? Because I believe like fiat in the form of cash is the king of that. So do you in any way like think about like privacy consequences of using like on-chain Bitcoin versus fiat?
Not really. Keep going. What else? Was there anything else to it?
No. That's just it. Like a lot of Bitcoiners.
Yeah. No, I can give more on that. So no, like no. I think that's like. I hate that, to be super honest. Like it to me that's the same thing as like paying with a credit card. Like it's the same thing. I just don't like a dollar is not respecting the other person. Like, so it's the same thing to me. And I don't love, like, here's the other thing too, like the dollar-based cash, like physical cash economy is not going to put a dent in the establishment at all. It's just not powerful enough to do it. Like circular economies, and that's what I would say. I would say this to non-Bitcoiners too. Like back to the farmer's market analogy, or like a cash-only taco stand. Like all you're doing is tinkering at the edges. You're tinkering at the edges, but there's not going to be a like this movement of a physical cash-based circular economy cannot put a dent in the establishment. Whereas if thousands and millions of business owners like literally went outside on the sidewalk and smashed their like credit card terminal with a sledgehammer, that would wreck the establishment. That would completely wreck the establishment. Like, and to your point of the like big players like having big impacts, this is why, to be super honest too, I was really sad when like Elon got confused about Bitcoin. Because if Tesla turned on Bitcoin, and they did it the right way, they installed BTC Pay Server, they sent feedback to the BTC Pay Server team about something they could do better, they ran it on their like corporate website that gets, you know, millions of hits a year or whatever. And if Tesla, if a person like Elon snapped his fingers and said, if you want a Tesla, you have to pay in Bitcoin, and worked that into his flow of how to get Bitcoin, you know, during the transition, like, and just said, sorry, we don't take like US dollars anymore. That is the, like, that would break the establishment. Same thing with Apple. Like, dude, I love my iPhone. Like, I'm talking to you over my iPhone right now. Like, I love it. Dude, if you said, hey, sorry, like, you have to pay in Bitcoin, like, or else there's no other way to get the iPhone. Or the same thing, we want to talk about like sports movements. Like, dude, Aaron Rodgers, like, paid in Bitcoin. Like, dude, go to the front office and talk to your team. Like, if this NFL team was like, hey, sorry, the only way you can like buy tickets is with Bitcoin. Sorry, because due to COVID and all this stuff, like the dollar doesn't really work for us anymore. Like, if there are like, I it's still kind of I might be like romanticist and like naive about this, but like I still believe like individuals can change the world. Like, I truly believe individuals can change the world. And so if they're like, I think individual, like, I agree with the Bitcoin sentiment too of like not putting billionaires on pedestals and things like that. So I agree, but I also think we need to demand more from our billionaires. Like, we need to demand more from, and maybe not billionaires, but just like leaders, like corporate leaders in America. Like, we have to demand more from them. They need to like what I thought Peter Thiel's talk at Bitcoin 2022 was really, really good, where he said the stock market is like quasi government controlled. Like, we need people, business owners in this country to care. And again, sorry, I'm very like speaking from a very US focused perspective. Like, we need business owners in this world to care about the future of the world, and we need their economic firepower and their productivity pouring into the Bitcoin bucket. And the number one way you can like do that is by like, number one, turning on Bitcoin as a parallel payment processor, and then moving people more and more onto it over time. Because if people in mass stopped doing business in the dollar and stopped giving liquidity to the dollar, like, then that would cause the just like decentralization of the world.
Oh yeah, and a way to do that would be perhaps to offer some small discounts in Bitcoin payments.
Yeah. So here's a tip for everyone. What I do for that discount thing is I reverse it. Because if you go and talk to a business owner like, hey, you should offer a discount to take Bitcoin, don't say that. Tell them, hey, you should charge people more to accept shitty money. Say it like that, and do it like a gas station. In America, there's a cash-based price for gas and there's a credit-based price for gas. That should be everywhere. At bars, like, hey, whatever you're charging for your IPA right now, that's the price in Bitcoin. If you pay with a card, it's $1.50 more. Like, that's what you should do. And every single business in America, every single business across the world should start dual pricing. Here's the money price. Here's the Republic credits price.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So Bitcoiners, like over the years, if they are involved for some time, they tend to be basically in two camps. One that aim to build like a citadel, and the other camp is basically digital nomads. So, and I believe you fall sort of into the first camp of like the citadel builder. So, why do you think like we should be sort of self-sufficient where we are, can care for our surroundings? And because I just recently talked to Pavel Lupták. He's like a famous digital nomad in Czech and Slovakia, and he has quite good arguments for that. So what are your arguments for like the citadel building?
Totally. So I super love this question too, and I'm glad that you asked it because it's tied to like the being fiat free. I actually released a video on my YouTube that talked about home ownership versus digital nomad also, and like I'm a both on this. Like I agree. Me in my situation, like I'm most primed to have an impact by like building a Citadel and like having local influence. Like that's the number one way that I can like impact the world and be like just impactful person. But there are people that will impact the world like as nomads. And I think there's a giant good, they both rely on each other. Both people rely on each other. Like, so because for you to be a digital nomad and you're on Airbnb or on whatever platform and you're like buying, you're buying time in a location, like you're buying that from someone who poured into that local area. And so there definitely is like a combined factor where they're both important. And on this topic, I also just want to shout out something else that I've just been thinking like about real estate. Like a lot of again, common personal finance advice on Twitter is very like real estate is a poor investment, Bitcoin is a like great investment, like things like that. And then when you press harder, it's because government has outsized control over land and like they can charge property taxes, and so you don't ever really own it, and you have, they could seize it at any time or whatever. So valid, but then my question is, okay, what's the solution? So the solution to that is we should dump our real estate to other normies that are going to allow the government to take more and more control over it. Like that doesn't seem like a great solution. Like the solution to me seems like the opposite. Like I think Bitcoiners need to be taking up space and grabbing ground and like taking physical area. So like in the same way that we're talking about Bitcoin taking up physical market share of the like day-to-day transactions of the world buying food, like Bitcoiners need to take up market share of it. And that's fine. Like you want to super parse terms and not call it land ownership, sweet, call it land rights ownership under the old legacy model. Like call it whatever you want. Like we need like Bitcoiners, whether you're a nomad or like a Citadel builder, like to care about their influence. Like you have to care about your influence and use it to like continue to create the reality that we want to live in.
All right, and in terms of location in the US, I've seen a lot of people moving from California and New York to Florida and Texas. So like what's your case for California? Because you live in California now and you build your Citadel there. So have you considered moving to like a friendlier locations?
Yeah, so I think that the differences between states in the United States are like very light and overstated. I think that like I don't think you actually get very much variability. I think the actual variability in the United States is between cities and rural, not between what exact like state line you're in. And so because of that, like when I do a cost benefit analysis, like the network of humans that I know, both in Bitcoin and out of Bitcoin, like in Southern California, is not something I have the ability to replicate anywhere else. Like, so in order to, again, like I said, have like what I hope to be like an outsized impact on the world, like I can't restart, like it's like having a lightning node. Like I can't restart what like the channels I have open. I can't, if I move somewhere else, like I'll be restarting from like zero. And then to offer another like perspective on it, my case for California and Southern California is like, if the state if we want to get hyperbolic and talk about some states will like collapse before other states, you want to go all the way there and play that mental exercise. Because I don't believe there's much variability between the states, I believe all you're doing then is really buying yourself 10 years because the other state will just collapse anyways. So why would I want to be on the back end of that? Why wouldn't I want to be on the front end of that? In the same way I'm talking about, and other people are talking, this is actually a laser quote, which is front end the pain of learning how to live on Bitcoin. Like, why would I want to front end the pain of like living through the downfall? Like, and then that means that like my Citadel will be the first one to recreate in its place. Like if my homeowners association or my town decides somehow to get 3 of 5 people on the board and put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and then we're able to like buy our land back from a defaulting larger government, like then our Citadel will be through the transition time before other states have even, are still a handful of years from bankruptcy. Like, so you know what I mean? So there's my regular case for like human connections matter. And then there's my like, if you want to go all the way to like corporate and like municipal debt, defaulting, there's my case in that situation too.
Yeah, oh, good take. So in some of your tweets, you mention SAS Flow. So could you elaborate more on that term, SAS Flow?
Yeah, so SAS Flow is just a Bitcoin version of cash flow. Like I think that Bitcoin won savings, right? Like Bitcoin is savings technology. It won that. And we largely understand that. I think next, from personal finance perspective, saving money is still only part of your personal finance, like health. Like having income and owning investments that like pay you to own them is another part of it. And so I'm like aspiring to kind of reframe my brain to like, I've saved personally, like I've saved a lot of Bitcoin. Like I've already saved a lot of Bitcoin. And so when I just think about what's the like marginal utility of saving more Bitcoin, it's there, but it's reducing. And then what is the marginal utility of like buying an asset or owning something that SATS flows? I don't know yet because it's hard to super measure it, and I don't have a lot of other people to like talk about it yet with. But I want to talk to more people about it because I kind of believe that like there is a point where the marginal utility of saving more Bitcoin goes down, and you would be better off buying a small business or buying a rental house that's paying you in Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah. I get it.
Or mining Bitcoin, and I shouldn't say there are people thinking about this. There are a ton of people thinking about this. I think miners probably think about it the most currently right now, where they're like, if you had, if all else is equal and you had the ability to acquire 10,000 USD worth of Bitcoin or a $10,000 ASIC at X%, energy price, like there is math there and there is a decision to be made there.
Oh yeah, but it's not just like Bitcoin cash flow or SATS flow related, right? Because somebody has to like grow the cows and manufacture the goods. And if everybody just sold everything and put it in Bitcoin, that would be very like prosperous, prosperous society.
Yes, and because currency units don't have value in and of themselves. Like it's the goods and services. Goods and services have value, and that's what we're learning more and more with the dollar every day. Exactly.
All right. So in terms of teaching people like financial literacy lessons, do you think it's actually easier like living on Bitcoin or let's say on Bitcoin standard than on fiat? And I have this impression myself because when I, for example, read The Richest Man in Babylon, like the classical book on financial literacy, it doesn't work anymore because it basically advocates for putting 10% of your earnings into savings. But that doesn't work with fiat. If you have, like in Czech Republic, we have 14% inflation now. So it just evaporates. But with Bitcoin, you can actually save and everything is actually like coming back to these old lessons. So do you have this impression?
Say the question part again.
Yeah, well, if you think like it's easier to understand like financial literacy on Bitcoin than on fiat.
Yeah, yes. So so straight up, is it easier? Understanding Bitcoin is very hard. Like, and everything that I'm tackling today is like it's helpful to talk it out live, because pushing, like, budgeting is hard. Budgeting while married is harder. Budgeting while married with two currencies while the earth is going through a monetary transition is very hard. Like knowing what the correct decision is hard to do. And so I think like the analogy of like fiat money is like the man on the bike, and like you have to grow at all costs, and you can't like rest. Like you can't, like you said, you can't rest on your savings, you can't rest on your like money, because it's losing to goods and services. So you constantly have to be kind of like this. You either have to be like a panicked worker, like trying to squeeze more hours out of the day, or you have to be a panicked investor going farther and farther like down the risk curve to like create a return that breaks even. Like I think so, like what I would say is that it feels good. Like I feel calmer. So yeah, I'm like punting on the whole word easy, but I feel calmer. Like getting to this point, and Heavily Armed Clown says this, like in his podcast about Get on Zero, where he says like he's not trying to like speculate extra hard. Like when you hold Bitcoin, when you fully hold Bitcoin and you don't have the like 1 foot in fiat, 1 foot in Bitcoin, you're constantly trying to like quote unquote like buy the dip lower, buy the dip lower, buy the dip lower. But when your brain has moved over to like I work for Bitcoin, like my base money is Bitcoin, then on a day like yesterday, your brain is not how do I buy this dip? Your brain is like, how do I produce value for the world? Like, how do I solve this next thing at my job, or pick up like another thing from my job? Or how do I, like continue to manage the like SAS flow that I do have in order to like do this? And so I would say that like it's calmer. And to everyone, like a funny thing is like being on zero is in my experience is actually, and I feel like other people have reported this, like it's actually easier than you made it out to be. Like it is one of this classic things that like the fear is like bigger in your head than it is in reality. I think is a classic thing. Like we think that like by holding on to some fiat, even for just like, so some other people have made the comment that it's like, why are you parsing hairs over this? Like, what's the difference between being 99% in and 100% in? I would say the difference between being 99% in and 100% in is that last mental bandwidth piece. Like, it's not necessarily about like the dollars and cents or the Bitcoin and the sats. Like, it's not necessarily about that. It's about the mental bandwidth piece. Like, have you moved your brain over to like using the different, and I'm also not even like caring about the exchange rate of your Bitcoin. I'm not demonizing that. Like using a dollar as your like mental unit, that's going to take that's the one thing that I throw out the like, it's going to take a very long time, like on is purely like the mental unit dollar is going to take a long time. But that doesn't mean that you can't remit and get paid in Bitcoin with every transaction that you do, and have Bitcoin as the base unit inside these accounts. So understanding Bitcoin is very, very hard. Learning to switch to a currency that you didn't grow up on is very hard, but it's calming once you've done it. And I'm thankful, like in 2022, with the state of the world right now, I'm very thankful and feel very blessed to be able to talk to you about this conversation right now, rather than being in a different spaces, trying to like learn what Bitcoin is right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we have a couple more minutes, so I'd like to just ask our listeners if anybody wants to join in and ask his question or her question to Brian. So just raise your hands. And in the meantime, perhaps let's talk about bottom-up versus top-down adoption. What's your opinion on like legal tender laws and Salvador, Central African Republic, and do you foresee this happening in some particular state, and if that's like good?
Yeah. So I don't hate the whole legal tender thing. Like I think that I don't hate it. I agree that like getting rid of capital, like specifically laying out that capital gains taxes do not apply is the number one most important thing. To me, capital gains taxes not applying and illegal tender are just kind of interchangeable terms. So I'm comfortable with both terms. don't super splice hairs between them. I think so. Bottom up versus top down. I like bottom up a lot. I want to see more leadership at the mid-tier level. Like, for example, I think a perfect example of like here's what I mean by middle-tier leadership. Jeff Fenster, CEO of Everbowl, a Cybowls fruit bowls with like 40 plus locations in the United States, turning on Bitcoin payment processing and talking about his business, like moving on to the Bitcoin standard. That to me is a beautiful, like middle tier thing. Like that is the kind of entrepreneur that I want to see like do this. Or another one would be like Lengthwise Brewing in Bakersfield, California. Like they have a like giant restaurant. Like I don't know if they're multi-location, but it's a physically big building with like lots of brewing equipment and like lots of tables, and they run their own like B2C pay server. Like in a town like Bakersfield, like that is a thing. Like that's a place you go to hang out. Like so business owners that have like regional influence, I think are like very, very good, because I appreciate the corporate adoption, but I think some of those people that are in leadership at corporate places like that could be doing more than they are. And so I pick bottom up, like mid-tier level business owners as like number one most impactful that I like watching.
All right. So we've got Peter as a speaker. So Peter, hi.
Hey there, my name's Peter. I missed first 10 minutes of the conversation, so I'm sorry if something like that already was answered here. But do you have some tips or tricks on maybe some, let's say, there is lots of crypto cards in the industry already, or any other service that you are using, being all in Bitcoin? Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks for asking. So I'm going to shout out, like, I'm going to talk about, so the number one product that I think is very important for like what we're talking about right now about Get on Zero is like a Bitcoin checking account. And everyone needs to be pushing on these Bitcoin checking accounts and pushing on ACH bill payment from Bitcoin across the board. And so I think any exchange or place or app that lets you direct deposit a normie paycheck into Bitcoin and then pay bills out from that. So people in places that are poking around this, like I think are Cash App, Coinbase, Strike, this app called Level, WageVest pays you in Bitcoin. BitRefill, their bill pay product, I think is like directionally correct and like a good like part of this. And then I also think that I do like want to shout out like the retirement accounts. Like I think the retirement accounts and moving your, like if you still have money at legacy custodians, that's also another way that you can like move and get on zero. And then as far as the like credit cards, that one is super like, I don't have a favorite credit card, like to be honest right now. All of the ones that I've used are fine, but I don't have a favorite one. And another thing I would say for the industry that we really, really need is we need joint accounts. Like all these Bitcoin apps, we need joint accounts. Like you need the ability for two partners running their finances in parallel to have access to the same accounts. And I haven't seen that super widespread yet. So I would say the first thing for people to do is like work on that direct deposit piece of getting it direct deposited to Bitcoin.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid lots of these services is unfortunately unavailable in Europe, especially in the Czech Republic. But maybe in time, hopefully.
Yeah, I believe
totally.
BitRefill is available, and but most of them aren't, sadly. Not yet. So we've got Wicked Smart Bitcoin joining us as a speaker. Hi.
Hey guys. Hey Brian. Good talk. I came in a little late, so I may have missed you touching on the point that I'm going to ask about. But I've been measuring my net wealth in terms of Bitcoin for a little bit over a year now. And shortly after I started doing that, I quickly realized that it's probably a good idea to get on zero. But financially, I'm in a little bit of a, maybe a different spot than most people. I have a fairly high cash flow multiple, compared to my living expenses. So, basically by getting on zero, I'm guaranteeing that my net worth, in terms of Bitcoin, basically never goes down, right? And the only thing that changes is really the rate of stacking. So if the price of Bitcoin goes lower, then the rate of stacking goes higher. So I actually kind of cheer on the lower prices. But the thing I wanted to ask about is, for people who maybe have living expenses higher than cash flow, and they're stuck in that situation for whatever reason, what do you tell them? What benefits do you say getting on zero has for those people?
Yeah. So I think super good question. I think it would have to be, you would have to get really granular down to the time frame. So I don't think so. Being on zero is easier if you're producing a surplus above your living expenses, as like Wicked pointed out, and like as I said. So it is. However, Bitcoin also, as we know, is like the number one most asymmetric like upside bet or savings technology, however you want to frame it. And so like if you like are in a situation where your living expenses are higher than the income you're bringing in, then it's all about cash flow. Like you have to, it's cash flow management, like managing the ins and the outs, because we still have to find a way to maximize the average amount of sats held for the average most amount of days. And so what I would do is I would like, it's like a puzzle. It's like a puzzle. You have to write down how much you're paid and on what days you get paid. And you have to write down on what days are the bills owed and how much are they. And if you're paying off debt, you have to write down what's the like minimum payment, but then you also have to write down like what the total goal is. So in a paying down debt situation, I actually do like want to shout out like Dave Ramsey. Like Dave Ramsey's whole debt snowball method of focusing on the lowest dollar amount like debt to pay off rather than focusing on the interest rate, I think is super powerful. Like that, getting that momentum for yourself. And so for people that don't know that, like if you have two credit cards and you have a $15,000 balance on one of them and a $7,000 balance on the other one, but the $7,000 balance has a lower interest rate, some people would tell you to start paying down the 15, but like the debt snowball method would tell you to pay down the 7. Like you want to clear these credit lines. You got to clear these credit lines. So yeah, the answer would be get super granular about your ins and your outs, and get your credit lines paid off. Yeah. What about you? You think about this too. What's your thing to them?
You throwing that back to me or
yeah,
Joseph?
Yeah. You just said it. What would you tell someone who their expenses were higher than their income?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because you want to tell them, like do everything you can to lower your living expenses and increase your cash flow, but that's not always the right, that's not always possible, right? Some people are literally living out of a cardboard box and can't get a second job or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough.
I actually thought of one more piece. Sorry to immediately cut you off.
No, go ahead,
guys, another piece. So like the debt snowball method of like pick your lowest like debt and focus on paying that one off just to get momentum and getting that one paid off. I would say the same thing about your stacking goals. So actually flipping this around and not throwing back the like, hey, you got to find a way to lower your expenses or you got to find a way to raise your income. Say those are just fixed. You got to find a way to like set an achievable stacking goal and hit it. You have to set an achievable stacking goal and hit it. Because say you're already super kind of just bummed out about personal finance. We have to get you momentum somehow. The old way of getting momentum would be, again, pick your smallest line and pay it off. or get like $1,000 emergency fund. But now at this point, like $1,000 emergency fund, it isn't really helpful. Like it's honestly really not. And you already probably feel that if you're in that situation. So you need to, right now, 1,000,000 sats is $310, $320. Like you have to pick that 1,000,000 sat savings goal and you have to hit it. You have to hit it. And then you have to defend that 1,000,000 sats. So defend, like you're actually playing from behind right now. So if your expenses are higher than your income, you're playing from behind. You need to get 1,000,000 sats and defend the 1,000,000 sats. And defending the 1,000,000 sats is what's going to get you the momentum that you can start to make the next decision up from that.
Thanks, Brian. I actually got to head out for a Fiat meeting. I'm running late. But
perfect. No, I love it.
All right. I love that point about attacking your stacking goal and then defending it. If anybody wants to join in as a speaker, we have a couple of more minutes. And I've seen actually a homeless guy in Amsterdam on Bitcoin Twitter asking for donations to hit a 1 million sats goal, and he did it. And then there was an article on Bitcoin Magazine about his story. So if he can do it, like anybody can do it because he doesn't have anything.
Yep.
So, all right. It seems like nobody's joining right now. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about your content that you're putting out right now. I believe you did some writing for Bitcoin Magazine. Now it's mostly about your podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, so if you search, YouTube is like the #1 best place. Search Brian Harrington on YouTube, and then also search Bitcoin is Hard Choice App on YouTube. And so, our podcast at Choice App, we put out 2 shows. One is called Bitcoin is Hard, and it's a podcast about Bitcoin personal finance. So yeah, if you enjoyed this today, like I try to cover this. We release a new episode every Friday, and I'm trying to talk to people about their perspective on Bitcoin and personal finance. And then we also have a show called Bitcoin is Local, which is covering Bitcoin across America. So we've covered about 7 different cities so far in 7 different states. And we're just covering these local Bitcoin meetups, showing businesses that accept Bitcoin. And just covering the grassroots movement that we talked about today.
All right, cool. And I believe you also mentioned Heavily Armed Clown as a podcast on this topic as well.
Search Heavily Armed Clown, search Liberty Mugs and the Rollo and Slappy show. They have a whole series on Get on Zero. Like I said, DM me on Twitter and we can add you into our little chat group on Twitter if you want to like start tackling this as well. And just search the Get on Zero hashtag and you'll see people.
All right. Well, I believe that's it. I'm all out of questions. We don't have any other speakers joining in. And you said you actually have we've got Olga. Maybe if you have like a couple of more minutes, let's hear it from Olga, an old friend of mine, and I haven't seen her for some time. Hi, Olga.
Hi, Joseph. How are you doing?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Thanks. I'm sorry, I have been dropping in and out for some time, but speaking about how hard Bitcoin is, I was curious about asking Brian whether he has checked out my Citadel wallet, because it's like we actually have released it like not so long ago, and I understand that it's not on every laptop right now. But from the feedback that we have received so far, yes, it is. I think it does fit one of the topics of yours, which is how hard Bitcoin can be. But on the other hand, it does cover one of the most problematic situations in every Bitcoiner's life, which is A, inheritance, B, losing your keys, and C, sharing the rights sharing the rights over some expenses from multisigs and all of that. So I was curious whether you have checked that out or not yet.
I haven't played with it. I'm following it on Twitter, and I have the website up right now. I was following it before, so no, not yet.
Okay.
But it sounds awesome.
Yeah, so please let me know if you have some couple of minutes in order to play around with that, because I don't want to push anything right now, but from the feedback that we have had so far, it is something that has been in extreme demand, and we're
Love it.
actually overwhelmed, to be honest, from all the feedback that we have been receiving so far, because we never thought that actually inheritance and multisigs like that, the time locks and all of that, can be such a huge problem for many other people. Because we actually created the wallet and the descriptor wallet libraries and all of that just for ourselves, because we had that problem.
Yep.
It could be really
No,
fun.
I love it. Yeah, no, I love it. I'll message you for a demo right now. But I agree, like getting your family on board with Bitcoin, like your family has to be, even before like trying to tackle inheritance or whatever, I just tell people like getting your family involved with Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as their base money is 100% has to be part of like something you work on as well.
Exactly, because one of our like personal use cases was about ourselves, like our company's expenses and plus our personal expenses, because when you have a family, for example, and you want to give your sons and daughters some part of your Bitcoins, at least when you die or within some time, it becomes a real problem, and everyone is trying to somehow resolve it through the like normal and classical legal paths, which actually are not, they're not like compliant with actually how Bitcoin works from technical perspective, because you can never explain to any lawyer how exactly your multisig works, how exactly it should work, how exactly you need to give up or not to give up your private or public keys. And even for personal and family usage, this is actually pretty cool, because you can like go to your son and say like, hey, come on, so if you are a dick, sorry, you will not receive any of my sats, like never, because I will still have, there's the multisig, so you have a choice whether to be a dick and like not to comply, not to learn, not to go to school, not to go to the university, not to understand what Bitcoin is, go and work for the government and become my enemy afterwards, or you can become a good guy, like have some guns and like be my personal guard and be my good boy. So I mean, this is actually one of the concepts that we had in our minds. It's like, you know, the perfect taxes kind of software. So yeah, I would really appreciate your feedback on this, because you have been working on all of these topics, which are complicated actually in Bitcoin, and it could be really cool to have just your feedback on how you would see this, whether it would work for you, whether it would not.
Yeah, no, perfect. Send you a message right now.
Cool, nice.
All right, so we'll be sure to check it out. Thanks, Olga. So I believe Brian is out of time now. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And I hope everybody is following Brian here. And also follow Trezor for another episodes of the Fiat-free Twitter Spaces. Thank you, everyone.
Hold on, one more thing for Trezor.
Yeah.
I forgot to say this part. Dude, the next trend is not dollar cost averaging. The next trend is self-custody averaging, because everything we just covered right now, you're going to get paid in Bitcoin, and then all the surplus Bitcoin is self-custody. So self-custody averaging is the next trend. Just another like budgeting thing I think about a lot. But no, for real, man. Thank you for this, and like thanks to Trezor. Like this is fun. So I'll see you guys more soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Later.
Thank you. See you around.